Thank you. We'll move on to our second work session topic, which is the Inclusive Dubuque Quarterly Update.
All right, Alex, since you're sticking with us, we'll just turn it right over to you.
Yeah. Terrific. Well, thank you very much again for inviting us to come here. As I said before, I'm standing in for my colleague Clara Lopez-Ortiz to talk a little bit about Inclusive Dubuque, which is another one of our initiatives that works very closely with Project Hope on a lot of different areas. So the Community Foundation holds as our values equity and opportunity, collaboration, stewardship, and knowledge, which we're really using to drive for the idea of a vibrant and inclusive Greater Dubuque region with resources and opportunities for all. Inclusive Dubuque is a network that we've been running with the city's partnership for many years that is focused on driving transformational change, fostering a culture of inclusion, and advancing equity in all the areas of community life. It was really put together with recognition from this council and from other key stakeholders around the community that we needed to focus on equity and inclusion to make Dubuque the most welcoming city that we can in order to be most effective in doing all those things that we just talked about in the Project Hope presentation. One of the key parts of the Inclusive Dubuque program are our Inclusive Dubuque Network meetings, which are held quarterly. The most recent one featured guest speaker Tommy Ross, who came in as a professional DEI conversation facilitator. It was a really terrific presentation that he gave. A number of different community members came in and were engaged about their own lived experience, how to be able to reframe their own mind to include a more welcoming and broader view of the different lived experiences that we have within our community. It was really a powerful work and got a lot of good responses from the people who were in attendance. One of the other focuses that we have for Inclusive Dubuque is on our Business Leader Equity Cohort and our Employer Inclusion Council. So the Business Leader Equity Cohort is a collection of business leaders, CEOs, other C-suite individuals who have come together to focus on issues around equity and business within our community. Again, how to make our community and our workforce environment as equitable, as welcoming, and as inclusive as possible. The Employer Inclusion Council is another group of individuals who are mid-level professionals who are some of the people more engaged with running the programs and engaging the work that the Business Leader Equity Cohort puts, kind of sets the vision for. So it's really a great partnership between the two different groups, being able to have leaders set vision and provide the impetus for this work, and then individuals who are connected to the businesses on the ground who are able to lead it and push it forward. This quarter was the first time that both groups were able to meet in person and come together, and we discussed the actionable items that the groups could take. And the focus that they had was on creating a welcoming community for college students and for our community to be able to retain college students. One of the challenges that I think all of you know about is the idea of us having these incredible colleges, universities, other higher educational facilities here in our community where we bring in individuals from around the country and really from around the world, educate them, but aren't always able to keep them within our community. How do we get those students to fall in love with Dubuque in the same way that we've all fallen in love with our city so that they stay here, build a family, and build a future within our city? The next thing that I want to talk and really get into a little bit more is the community equity profile. And this is because it has been a big part of our focus recently and a big part of Clara's focus especially. For those of you who might not be aware, the community equity profile is a collective work that is done to get community input, combine it with data and expert opinion on key focus areas, 7 different topic areas that are all related to equity in some way. So I'll go into it a little bit more, but how are we as a community succeeding in each of these different focus areas. Now, we ran this, the first community equity profile back in 2015, which many of you may remember, and had a great response. It really led to a lot of wonderful conversations and a lot of great action that continued forward. What we want to do now is bring this together, rerun it in order to hold ourselves accountable and in order to make sure that we are moving in the correct direction. What has improved? Where have we succeeded? Where are there still gaps? And what do members of the community feel is our perspective, is the thing that we need to be focusing on in order to make sure that everybody is succeeding and thriving? We are hopeful that once all this data and information has been collected, we will be able to present it to the community and to leaders such as yourselves in order to help with policy decisions, in order to help spur activity within the community and get people energized about how to make sure that all of their neighbors are thriving in the way that we want them to. So, like I said before, there are 7 topics that we are doing for the Community Equity Profile, which will all be discussed over the next 8 months. So each month we'll have a different topic. We are taking December off because it is cold and everybody's traveling. This September, we are currently in the midst of discussing housing, and then next month will be workforce and economic well-being, followed by education, health and wellness, arts and culture, safe neighborhoods, and then ending next year on transportation. And we have a little graphic on the side, but I'll kind of walk through it as well. The way that this works every month is that we will lead off the month with a panel discussion hosted by the Telegraph Herald, who are our key partners in this work. These panel discussions will allow for experts, individuals with lived experience, other key stakeholders to come together and to discuss this, all of this information, while we also present key pieces of data from those different data sources that we discussed before, right? How have we changed according to the census data or according to the HUD user data? Following those panel discussions, we're going to host a series of community conversations throughout the community, which is where we are hopeful that community members will come together and share their experiences, their frustrations, their hopes, and what they have seen with our community. We're fortunate enough to have the first community conversation for housing hosted last week at Workboard Seminary, I wasn't in attendance, but heard that it went very well, and there was a lot of very passionate engagement around that. We will be collecting anonymously the data from all of those conversations and pooling that together with a series of community surveys that are sent out on each of the topics. So using the collected publicly available data, the expert analysis, the community conversation input, and the community surveys, we will finally put all of that together every month into a snapshot, which we distribute to yourselves and to other community members in order to show what was said, what are people feeling, what direction should we go in. And then at the end of the 8 months, we will bring all of the data together and try to bring people together to discuss what are the next steps that we should be taking as a community. Each community conversation is run by a facilitator, a trained facilitator who helps make sure that the conversations are moving forward and are productive for those participants. So far, we have 41 different facilitators signed up, and we were going to have another training in November to get even more. The panel discussions, like I said, are in partnership with TH Media, and our last one for housing had 140 attendees down at Steeple Square. It was really amazing to see that many people engaged around the issue. There were 14 people present, like I said before, for our first community conversation at Wartburg. The other thing, because we talked about data for Project Hope, I also thought it might be useful for those of you who weren't present at the panel to discuss a little bit of the data that we collected regarding housing for the community equity profile. Now, the focus that we are having is taking that 2015 data that we collected and updating it with the current available data in order to show a comparison. So up here we have the owner-occupied versus renter-occupied percentages broken down by race and ethnicity. Just to call to your attention, a couple of things. First of all, it seems that the most available data shows that in general, we have a higher rate of renter-occupied housing now than we did at the previous equity profile. And I also want to call out the ownership rate for our Black community, which was at 7% for the previous equity profile and is now at 9%. This is another one of those shocking numbers that I know has animated a lot of people around this room in conversations in the past. Next, we have a chart that's looking at housing affordability by income group. So each of these different columns here represent the percentage, the number of households within a percentage of the area median income. So for example, on the far left is the column that is showing those people who make 0% to 30% of the area median income. Now, what I want to call out from this chart specifically is if you look at the leftmost columns, we have had an increase in the number of households within that 0 to 30%, but a decrease in the number of affordable units available for them. And I think a lot of us have recognized the housing shortage. And while this isn't 2022 data, I think it's likely that a number of people are still experiencing those kind of crunches around affordable low-income housing within our community. Next is a breakdown of housing cost burden by race and ethnicity. So again, this is looking at how much of an income is a household spending on their housing. The way that the housing department breaks it down is that it's considered affordable if you were spending less than 30% of your income on housing. The next group, that middle amount, is households spending between 30 and 50% of their income on housing. And then finally, those households spending more than 50% of their income on housing. You can see some of the changes and some of the differences that between the previous equity profile and the current one. Again, one thing that I want to call out is that nearly 50% of our Black community, according to this data, is spending more than 50% of their income on housing right now. And then finally, for the last chart, is the idea of access to quality housing, right? The expense of housing is one thing, but also, is it quality? Is it a good environment for a family and for a household to be able to live in? The way that this is broke down, there are 4 different housing problems that the housing department kind of categorizes. The left two most colors, the kind of lighter colored colors, are for those households that have no housing problems, 0 of the 4, and then the darker ones are those that have at least one housing problem. So you can see on the very leftmost side, those making between 80 and 100% of the area median income. The vast majority do not have any housing problems, and it's actually improved since the last equity profile. But on the other end of the spectrum, those within the 0% to 30% area median income, we've seen an increase in the number of households that are experiencing housing problems. Part of that is due to the fact that there are just more households within that range right now, but the increase there is still pretty significant. So that is some of the data that we had on housing, data that will be presented to each of the community conversations and was present at the panel. Our next community conversations for housing, there are going to be 4 more held this month, 2 tomorrow, one on September 21st, and then another one on September 22nd. We encourage anyone here to please participate, or if you know of community members, those people that you speak with who are really passionate and engaged about these topics, please feel free to share with them these different times to see if they can come out and make sure that they have their voices heard. There's also a QR code for input on the survey that we've put out to the community. And if there are any questions, you can reach out to Clara, and she'll be happy to provide more information or to help spread the word. And next month, we are going to be looking at workforce and economic well-being as the topic conversation. And that first equity panel hosted by TH Media is going to be held on September 28th at Steeple Square from 5:30 to 7:30 with the presentation beginning at 6 p.m. The last panel was really great. A lot of passionate individuals who stayed around discussing for a long time housing. And I think we should get just as much commitment and interest from people talking about workforce and economic well-being. And then finally, the last thing that I want to touch on as part of Inclusive Dubuque is we are sponsoring this year's Dubuque Latinx Festival, which is going to be held on October 1st from 3 to 8 p.m. at the Smokestack. And we'd like to invite everybody to please attend if you're available. I think it's going to be a great experience. They hosted it last year, and it was terrific, and I'm really thrilled that this is continuing and hopefully going to become an annual thing here in Dubuque, celebrating our Latinx population. And so I want to thank you all again for inviting me to come here and open it up for any discussion or to see if there are any questions that I can help answer. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions, discussion? We get them all out in the last work session? You must have. Did a good job answering them. Oh yeah, go ahead, Mr. Jones.
I just have to say how impressed I am. Once again, here's a community foundation that's not just building financial capital, but building human capital in a very real way and helping us to decipher some pretty tough questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And I do want to reiterate that we feel our greatest assets is our partnership with city staff in the work that they are doing. I talked about the Office of Shared Prosperity with Project Hope, but there are so many different offices. Jill Connors, sitting behind me today, has been an incredible partner. The Office of Equity and Human Rights, the Housing Department. All of these have been incredible partners in helping us to move forward the work. And I think it's one of the strengths of our community that we have stakeholders coming together to focus on these problems together as a group.
Well, I have one question. This has been really helpful to see some of the data that you have, but it's also very difficult to look at, isn't it? I mean, it's a challenge because it's not a whole lot of good news in there, at least not tonight. I'm sure there's some other things, but this is challenging stuff to look at. One of the things that I'm always curious about is our comparison as a city to other cities and what that really looks like. So we have an issue with housing. I hear that other cities have similar issues with housing. I'd like to know how similar. I'd like to know how that looks in, let's just use places close to us in Cedar Rapids and in Iowa City and in Madison and other places that are kind of around us. Are you tracking any of that, or is there a way to easily do that? I'm just kind of curious on that front.
So I think that the best information out there probably right now comes from the ECIA housing report that came out. I would say from what I have seen, from what I have read, and what I've looked at, housing is a major challenge throughout the country. I'm not aware of a city or a community right now that's really said, hey, we're doing this perfectly, right? Not a problem. It really has been a big challenge going forward. And I think, one of the frustrations that will come from this is as we push for a solution, everybody else is going to be pushing at the same time. So how is there enough bandwidth for every community to be able to succeed with its housing challenges when everybody is really faced with this at the same time? I will also say that your comment on comparison to other communities is a really interesting one, and one that I've been thinking about a lot in terms of poverty as well, because we want to be able to hold ourselves to targets and to try to set goals around the work that we are doing, right? Are we really decreasing poverty in the same way? Are we helping those communities equitably so that everybody is succeeding? That's part of the idea behind the community equity profile is we ran this in 2015. Let's update it now. How are we doing? Where do we need to move forward? One thing that we recently looked at was trying to do the same thing with poverty, running a comparison with every U.S. county to see what the different poverty rates counties had been able to achieve were, with the idea of, can we decrease our poverty rate by 7%? Is that feasible without large federal intervention? I wasn't aware of the answer, and so trying to look at where do we stack up with other places. Now that introduces its own problems. The lowest poverty rate in the country is from a county in Texas with 1,200 people, right? They had a very high poverty rate. A new company moved in, they had a very low poverty rate. That's not necessarily a model that we can replicate here. But we've been working at trying to find comparison counties, to be able to eliminate smaller counties that we can't compare with, and also extremely wealthy counties where it's just too expensive for poor people to be able to find a home. That's how they get a low poverty rate, is by having housing prices that are astronomical. And that's not necessarily the model we're following either. I can say that looking at some of those data and trying to narrow it down, if we're able to decrease our poverty rate by around 1%, we might be within the top 10% of counties within the U.S. for our category. What our category is debatable. And if we wanted to get within the top 10, it'd be about a 3.4% decrease. I like the idea of comparing ourselves to the country and saying we want to be one of the best in these categories. I think that Anderson Sanchi from the Office of Shared Prosperity had a great point, which is not only do we don't just want to have one of the top 10 poverty rates, but for our Black community, for our Pacific Islander community as well. Is everybody succeeding when we hit those targets? So anyway, a little off topic, but I thought it was a great point you made about being able to compare ourselves to other places and find out who is actually doing the work that we want to be able to do. What models should we follow?
Thank you very much for that. It wasn't off topic at all. That was incredibly helpful. So thank you very much, Alex. Well, thank you for sticking with us for both work sessions. We really appreciate that, and it was great information. We look forward to seeing you around the community at these discussions, and then again here, I'm guessing, someday soon. So,
All right.
thank
Absolutely.
you much.
Thank you so much.
There being no further business in the work session, we'll adjourn till the regular meeting at 6:30.